Sterling Short Stories. Step into the story.
The dark web game that should never be played. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Ugh, how naive I was. My best friend Jonah was always messing around with things he shouldn't. He had this fascination with the dark web, always talking about it like it was some hidden world of secrets, things people weren't supposed to know. I wasn't into it, but Jonah insisted it was the key to finding things that normal people couldn't. Stuff like rare games, music, and exclusive content. One afternoon after school, Jonah showed me something he'd found. A link to a game. No title, just a plain URL. The kind of URL that looked like it came from deep in the web, filled with numbers and letters that didn't seem to belong together. "You've got to see this," Jonah said, his eyes wide with excitement. "It's like nothing you've ever played before. Totally banned. No one's even supposed to have it." I hesitated, but Jonah was persistent. I could tell he'd been up to something all week. His usual grin was missing, replaced by a nervous energy I couldn't ignore. "I found it on the dark web," he said, like that explained everything. Reluctantly, I agreed. Jonah loaded the page on his laptop, the screen flickering strangely for a second as the link opened. The page was basic, nothing special. But then the words appeared. "Enter the void, play if you dare." Jonah clicked without a second thought, and a download started automatically. The game's file was named Enter the Void. I didn't know it at the time, but that name would haunt me forever. We installed it quickly, and the game opened to a static screen. There were no instructions, no loading bars, just a small, cryptic message. "You are not alone." Jonah looked at me with an excited smile. "It's supposed to mess with your head, like it's alive. You'll see." I didn't believe him. But the moment I started playing, everything changed. At first, it seemed normal, just a simple adventure game, like any other. You controlled a small, pixelated character wandering through a foggy, abandoned town. But as I ventured deeper into the town, strange things started happening. The colors on the screen shifted, darker, colder. I paused the game. My heart was racing. Jonah was still glued to his laptop, his face flickering between excitement and nervousness. "What do you think?" he asked, clearly proud of his find. I looked back at the screen. My character was standing still, but now there was something off. There was a figure in the distance, hidden by the mist. It was humanoid, tall, and its features were blurred. It wasn't part of the game's graphics. It looked too real, too alive. I had to know more. I unpaused the game. The moment I did, everything changed. The screen flashed bright red, and the static grew unbearable. My character started moving on its own, walking toward the figure. I tried to stop it, but my hands were frozen. I looked at Jonah, but his expression had changed. He was staring at the screen now, his lips slightly parted. His face was pale, like he had seen something he couldn't unsee. "Jonah, what's happening?" My voice trembled. But Jonah didn't answer. His eyes were fixed, and suddenly a message flashed on the screen. "You have been chosen." My character reached the figure. And that's when I realized it wasn't just a figure. It was looking at me. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its mouth twisted into a smile, a grin that stretched far too wide to be human. "You shouldn't have clicked the link." The words sounded like they echoed through my speakers, but they weren't from the game. They were in my head, deep, like the figure was inside my mind. Jonah suddenly jumped up from his seat, his face contorted with fear. This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered, his voice breaking. Before I could react, the game screen went black. I blinked. The room was silent. But then, something was different. My laptop, Jonah's laptop, and even my phone. They all flickered to life, displaying the same thing. "You are now part of the void." The whispering started again, louder this time. I froze. I couldn't move. Jonah covered his ears and crumbled to the floor. "You are now part of the void. It just wouldn't stop." Then, from my phone, a new message appeared. "You've been chosen. You are mine now." I tried to shut everything off, but nothing worked. My hands were shaking as I struggled with the power buttons. Every screen stayed lit, and the whispering grew louder, now accompanied by soft footsteps that seemed to echo around the room. I turned to Jonah, but he wasn't sitting in his chair anymore. The chair was empty. My pulse spiked, and I called his name. "Jonah!" But there was no answer. I stood up, my legs weak, and turned to the door. But as I stepped toward it, something stopped me. Something cold, like an invisible force was pressing against my chest. I looked around. Jonah's laptop was still glowing. The words on the screen changed again. "You can't leave." I felt something in the air. The room grew darker, colder. The shadows in the corners twisted, bending unnaturally, like they were reaching out for me. Then, my laptop screen blinked, and the figure, the one from the game, appeared. Only this time, it wasn't just on the screen. It was standing in my room, its yellow eyes glowing, its smile stretched impossibly wide. I could hear its voice, deep and growling. It was in my head. It stared for a moment, but it felt like forever. And then finally, in a deep growl, it said, "You are part of the void now. There is no escape." I don't remember how I got out of that room, or how I woke up on the couch downstairs. I just remember the whispers, the images, the feeling of being watched. The police never found Jonah. His laptop and phone disappeared. And of course, they didn't believe my story. Why would they? And as for me, the game? It still sits on my laptop, waiting for me to click it again. And I know I'll have to if I want to find Jonah. I lost my best friend that day. But I know he's out there, in the void. Every night, I hear the whispers. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I see its eyes staring back at me from the screen. I shouldn't have clicked the link. And poor Jonah. Well, I just wish he didn't either. Please like and subscribe to Sterling Short Stories on YouTube. But only if you dare.
Sterling Short Stories. Step into the story.